entertainment matches down at the Coliseum this Tuesday?
Yeah.
Boy, what a sports entertainment match that was. Boy, that guy's a great sports entertainer. I was sitting in a conference room one time with Vince McMahon and Shane McMahon and Jim Ross and Bruce Pritchard and a bunch of other people. And Shane McMahon actually asked this question, and I quote, and I swear on my mother's grave that this is a legitimate exchange that we had. What should we call our talent? I said, what about wrestlers? We're not wrestling. We're sports entertainment. Should we call them entertainers? Should we call them this or whatever he said? I said, look, they wear wrestling boots and wrestling tights. They get in a wrestling ring and they have wrestling matches. What do you want to call them, ballet dancers? They've deluded themselves. Everybody up there are billionaires or millionaires because of the professional wrestling business, and they won't admit they're in it. Now, I'll work with you. I'll work with you. If you'll just not insult me by acting like I'm an idiot and don't know what's going on, I'll work with you. If you want to call the lamp a table, I'll call the lamp a table as long as we've agreed between you and me that I know that it's a lamp. I'll call it anything you want, but don't tell me it's not a lamp because I'm looking at it. It's got a bulb and a shade.
Yeah. I'm glad, it's someone, I know you would have a lot to say about that because that's one thing that has been just constantly hammered down the throats of a lot of people. A lot of interviews that are coming out, especially with the new ECW, and TNA is always going to be put on that radar, but it just always seems like they're trying to keep that thing down. And
I'll tell you what, the damage that the WWE does to TNA is not presenting better wrestling, is not presenting a better program. The damage that the WWE does to not only TNA, but anybody else that tries to promote professional wrestling in this country is unfortunately because of their long tenure, because they were there first, because they've got wide coverage. People think that's what professional wrestling looks like these days, and so they choose to turn it off, for the most part, to either turn it off, or they've created a new fan base that thinks that that's what wrestling is supposed to look like. So basically, the WWE being in existence, in my opinion, keeps other wrestling promoters from drawing crowds because you can't get any credibility anymore. If you say, Jim wants to challenge Joe for the TNA championship or the ROH championship or the FBI championship or whatever it is, then people will say, well, gosh, we looked at WWE and nobody cares about the titles because it's all hogwash and the son-in-law has it and they're just worried about showing naked male midget asses, and so why should the wrestling match be important? That's the damage that the WWE does. It's not because they're better competition in terms of the product. It's that they blow credibility out of the water for anybody else who wants to try to present a good one.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Cornette.
Not a problem.
Our next question comes from Brian Shank with WKRF 1220 AM.
Hey, John. How you doing?
Hey, Jimmy. A pleasure to talk to you. Been a fan for a long time. I'm one of those great guys who go back to the 80s with the NWA TV and you out there at the tennis racket with the greatest tag team ever, the Midnight Express.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it very much.
No problem. Yeah, I learned a lot watching because back in the old days in the NWA, you had the smaller audience. You had the little studio that you guys did the wrestling matches at, and sometimes I heard over 95, 100 degrees in that old studio, and you really gave it your all every time you went out there, whether it was some scrub versus Dennis Condrey by himself, or whether Arn Anderson had to wrestle somebody. I miss the intensity and the effort by the wrestlers today, and I talk about today meaning WWE.
Well, the thing is that, first of all, about giving your all, the thing is, if you enjoy what you do for a living, and also if somebody's paying you good money to do it, I believe you ought to go out and give it everything you got. And also, when you're working with a team like the Midnight Express, I wasn't going to go out and sit on my butt and not do what I was supposed to do because then that would reflect badly on them. And here they are, the best tag team in professional wrestling at that point. And, I'm not going to go out and make them look bad. So, yeah, everybody worked together and worked hard and enjoyed what they did and were given the freedom to be who they wanted to be.
Absolutely. And them being, I think, in my opinion, the best tag team ever, that's not about. And I also want to say, you remember back a date I'm going to throw at you, March 27th, 1988.
The first Clash of Champions, Greensboro, Midnight of Fantastics. How's that?
What else? The best part about it is you guys went up head-to-head with WrestleMania 4. That's what just killed me. I loved it.
Well, that was one of the strategies at that time. Vince would piss in Crockett's pool, and then he'd turn around and do the same thing. And, You know, the one thing is it was competition, and it was interesting for the wrestling fans, and they had a choice. They had an alternative. They could watch the one show or watch the other show. You didn't have to just eat a steak every day. You could have chicken. You could have a hamburger. You could have a salad. And we had a ball doing what we did, and we had a ball doing that show. It was a tremendous, and more people saw the Clash of Champions live on TBS than saw
Which was free.
Yeah, without a doubt. That was one of the better shows.
Clash was free. You had to pay for
that. Pay for that somewhere here. And
so,
I get a little bit embarrassed to be a fan of the WWE and stuff like that. I either watch TNA or like an old NWA show. And speaking of TNA now, obviously with you coming in and just bringing the wealth of experience that you've had for the last 20-something years, is there anybody there that reminds you of the old days back in the 80s that could really, really accomplish themselves, either as a tag team or an individual? I know Samoa Joe goes without saying, but what about the Naturals now with Shane Douglas?
Well, I tell you, and you know, bear in mind now, I've only just started with TNA, and I was on a self-imposed wrestling exile for quite a bit last year and early this year, so I didn't get to see a lot of the programming. But I did say one thing at the company meeting on Impact a couple of weeks ago that unfortunately for time reasons was edited out because the segment ran very long because there was a lot of stuff going on. But I made the point, and I'll make it again here, that to me, AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels and America's Most Wanted had one of the best tag team matches that I've seen in years. In America, at least, on the pay-per-view, and as well, I think they're two of the best tag teams in the business. And Daniels and Styles are more noted for being individuals that have recently teamed up. America's Most Wanted has been together for a while, but you know, the Death Sentence is kind of a revamped version of the old Midnight Express Vegematic, and I mentioned that to Chris Harrison and James Storm when I saw them several months ago, and I said, thanks for keeping it alive, because they do it great, too, and they do a lot of other stuff that actually the Midnight never attempted. But, you know, the teams, you can't just jump in and do this like playing Twister, for God's sake.
Right.
So, you know, with America's Most Wanted and Styles and Daniels, you're getting state-of-the-art tag team wrestling to me in this country today.
You mentioned Matt Morgan being a waste of talent, you know, not being used to his full potential. Do you also think someone like Rob Conway is also another guy who is just being a big laughing stock?
Oh, good heaven. And, you know, boy, I'm glad you mentioned that because I got to say Rob Conway, Doug Basham, Danny Basham, and obviously Eugene Nick Dinsmore, they were the backbone, the core of Ohio Valley Wrestling here when I first got here, and for 3 or 4 years afterwards. Doug Basham is Danny Davis's nephew. He was Danny's first student. And Nick Dinsmore is like Danny's adopted son, his second student. The Damager from right up the road in Seymour, Indiana, home of Rip Rogers and John Cougar Mellencamp, his third student, and Conway was his fourth student. Or I think I'll reverse Conway and Damage. Anyway, these guys, what talents they are, they can talk, they can wrestle. If I needed 5 minutes, if I needed 30 minutes, if I needed an interview, if I needed the ring truck tire changed, and I pushed and pushed and pushed for months and years. Why aren't you calling these people up? Why aren't you using them? And finally they do, and then one guy becomes a brain-damaged goof like he got hit by a bus on Broadway. Conway, the heels of his boots are worn out from laying down so much, and the Bashams are the invisible men.
Yeah.
But yet they will take these useless divas. I mean, has anybody ever seen any more annoying television than this diva search business? They'll take them and they'll pay them $250,000 to take their clothes off on the cover of Playboy magazine. You know what? If I wanted to, I love porn. If I wanted to get the porn business, I'd be in the porn business. And I don't have anything against it, but don't mix it in with my wrestling. I like ice cream and ketchup too, but not together.
I like
porn. You got divas being paid. You got substandard talent being used because they're the relative of someone or somebody's buddy. And here you got these great young talents that are sitting at home during their prime peak athletic years, not being allowed to show what they can do, and I think it's disgraceful.
Yeah, I agree with you. One more quick question here. Is Ric Flair embarrassing himself in the WWE right now, or is he just doing what he has to do to collect the paycheck?
No, you know, I can't say either. Ric Flair, I love Ric Flair. He was not only a very important influence in my career, but also when you talk about the total package, when you talk about athletic ability, dedication, night in and night out performance, wrestling ability, personality, everything, Rick is the man for the last 25 years. But the thing is, Rick is now not what he once was because he's nearing 60, so he's just better than like 60% of the guys in the business instead of 100. But if Ric Flair could not go out in a ring, in an arena, at least a few times a week and do what he does and has done so well for so long, he would be a miserable person. I say if Ric Flair can wrestle when he's 75, I know how much he loves it. I think he doesn't have to do it for free, but he probably would. And I say let him do it because, you know, with what he's meant, and you see the ovation he gets, you see the numbers he gets. Ric Flair's a Teflon man in terms of the fans' eyes. They respect him.
He holds the audience.
And the
He doesn't throw it.
respect, I think, means that they overlook the age factor. They overlook the fact that he's past his physical peak because at least it's like being able to go to a baseball game now and still see Mickey Mantle play.
Right.
I mean, I don't care if he hits the home run. I saw him in person.
Yep. Well, I'll tell you what, Jimmy, it was a pleasure to talk to you. And again, those days, the NWA back in the day, I hope they can kind of, you know, come back alive again here in TNA. And so far, it's a good start. It's good to see you on TV again, and it's good to see you alive, healthy, and well. Thank you so much.
Thanks, man, very much.
Thank you.
Our next question comes from Doc Young.